This will be a short video on some of the ideas that I think are important in packing a backpack, at least the ones that I've come to think are important. So I've tried to, I'm not actually about to go backpacking, but I've just kind of assembled my gear and some things, but I'll just kind of go over a couple of the ideas. This is the backpack that I'm going to use. It's one I use for kind of local, not heavy trips. I don't use stuff sacks much. There are a couple that there's actually just one that I use, one stuff sack and a ditty sack. And the reason I use one stuff sack, so this is my shelter. In this case, it's a tent. Sometimes it's a tarp. I'll generally carry a stuff sack because if it's wet, I like to put it inside of the stuff sack just to try to minimize how much it makes everything else wet later on. The other sack that I use is right here. It's what I call a ditty sack, and it has stuff in it. This is really just to kind of keep my small stuff organized. So in here I keep my electronics, a repair kit, sew kit, a first aid, hygiene kit, a little notebook that I write things down in, and just a little bit of emergency fire starter, which I've never had to use, and I hope I never have to use, but I find it convenient to put these things into a little sack so that I always know where they are and I'm not just fishing around inside of my pack. So because I don't use stuff sacks, the way that I choose to keep my stuff dry, I also don't use a pack cover. Those don't really work very well anyway. So I put a plastic bag inside of my backpack. Typically this is called a pack liner. It's always good to check your pack liner every now and then to make sure it's still waterproof. If you use it enough, of course, you can wear holes in it. So I just insert the pack liner into the backpack, and the kind of backpack that I tend to use is just really a big sack with straps on it. One of the key ideas that you want to kind of build your system around is, where do I want the weight to ride? And for me, the heaviest thing in my pack almost always is the food bag. And this has probably only got like 2 days worth of food in it. But if you had 5 days worth of food in it, you know, that's 10 pounds. So that's the thing I'm sort of building around. So typically what you don't want is, you don't want the heaviest thing in your pack at the very bottom of your pack, and you don't want it at the very top of your pack. You kind of want it in the middle, and you want it close to your back. It just carries better that way, and it gives you better center of gravity by keeping it closer to your back. So the way that I think about packing my stuff is, I try to put light things at the bottom that I'm not going to need during the day, and then my food will go on top of that, and then on top of that are going to be some things that I'm going to access during the day. For example, here's my cook kit. I may stop and make coffee. I want to be able to get to this without exploding my whole pack out. My ditty bag tends to stay at the top because if I want to take some notes, get some aspirin or a bandage or a cable to charge my phone or something, I want that accessible and at the top. Some things that are kind of unique to the way that I do things. This is kind of part of my cook stuff. I boil water. I put my food in here. I put the boiling water in, and then I put it inside of this envelope, to keep it warm, and that's how I cook. But then I use this part as something to sit on occasionally, and also as a pad on my back. So it lives outside of the pack liner, but inside of the backpack against my back. So the one thing that I forgot to bring in here is my quilt. So let me grab that real quick. I wanted to grab the quilt because the quilt kind of plays kind of an important role in the way that I pack. So I'm just going to pack the pack real quick the way that I would typically pack it. And this is going to assume everything's dry. Here's my shelter. Like I said, I use a stuff sack for it because I have the shelter. I also put the tent stakes in there with the shelter, but it's pretty light. So, and because it's dry, I just put it in the bottom of the pack liner. If it were wet, like if I got up in the morning and it was raining, which is kind of one of the things that you hate, I would roll up my tent. I may put it into the stuff sack, or I may not, depending on how big of a hurry I am in to get out of the rain. And I would do one of two things. One is I just put it in the bottom of my pack and then put the pack liner in. So it's in the pack, but outside of the pack liner, so it can't get my other stuff wet. Or the kind of packs that I tend to use have a big stretchy pocket on the outside. I might just shove it in there. I like doing that less because it changes my center of gravity a little bit, but sometimes I do that. Sometimes I get in a crazy frenzy when I wake up in the morning and it's raining. So everything dry, I just put my shelter in the bottom, and then any clothes that I have, I would stick on top of that. Clothes I'm not gonna wear that day. Clothes I'm gonna wear that day, I put closer to the top so I don't have to dig to the bottom of my pack to get things. So now I'm already several inches up from the bottom of the pack. Then, so like here's my sleeping pad, here's my knee pillow, here's my head pillow. I got all these luxury items. I stick that in. Here's a wind shirt. I generally carry a wind shirt. The wind shirt typically would stay on the outside of the pack, in the pocket on the outside of the pack, because I want to be able to get to it quickly if I need it. Or one of the things that I do with packs is I have a pocket on the bottom of the pack. So that's an additional space, but most people don't have that. Some things I take off, I stick them in the bottom of the pack so I don't have to, the pocket in the bottom, so I don't have to take my pack off when I do that. But I'm going to stick this in the outside for now. So now my pack has got, a good bit of stuff in it. So my hand, if you can see, is right here, and the bottom of the pack is here. So then I would drop the food bag in. Now, and I make sure it's to the side of the pack that's going to be closest to my back. That's where I want it to be. And the thing that's going to keep it in that position and not have it roll away from me and roll to this side of the pack, furthest from my back, is the quilt. So next, I'll put my ditty bag in. I'll put my cook kit in. And that's about it. So now I just take my quilt and I just stuff it in, and I try to get it as far down into the pack as I can get. It's down, so it compresses really well. And what this does now is I'm stuffing it down, but on the side of the pack that's furthest away from my back, so it holds my food bag, for example, close to my back. It's not going to move away. And the last thing I do is I always have a rain kilt. I like to use the rain kilt if it's raining, of course, and I use it for other things. One of which is when I stop and I'm going to explode my pack, I put it down on the ground and I put my stuff on top of it, especially if it's damp. or really dirty. I like to do that. So that always goes on the top. That's the first thing I'm going to take out when I open up my pack. Then I roll that pack liner down so water can't get in. This, you don't have one, so I'm not going to make a big deal about it, but that would go inside the pack, outside the pack liner, against my back. A little additional padding. I tend to use this system for water. I just fill water into these smart water bottles, and I put a filter on the top, and I just drink out of it, or I squeeze water into a cook pot. I typically carry 2 1-liter bottles, and I put them on the outside of the pack. I only have one bottle, empty bottle right now, so I just have one here, but I would typically have one on this. So I typically would have one on this side, and this is the side I'd be drinking with. And if I felt like I needed to carry more water, I would put it on this side. I try to carry only as much water as I need to get to the next water, because it's 2 pounds a liter. So I always say, if you don't run out of water every now and then, you're carrying too much water. Not everybody agrees with that approach, but that's pretty much all there is to the way that I pack the pack. The stuff that I'm going to need during the day is accessible to me without having to explode my pack out completely. Then at the end of the day, I stop. Let's say I'm going to set up my camp. Typically what I do at that point is, and I do this during the day as well, any chance I have to pull my quilt out and throw it up over a bush or into a tree or something like that, just to let it air a little bit and dry, I do that. But so I pull my quilt out, put it up on a branch. Then what I will typically do is I will pull the pack liner out of the pack. So now here's all my gear separate from my backpack. And the reason that I like to do this is I'm keeping all of my stuff clean and dry inside of that. But it's easy for me to reach in here, get my shelter out. I set up my shelter. Once my shelter is set up, I throw this either under the tarp or into the tent. And so there's been a pretty clean transfer of my stuff from my backpack to where I'm going to be spending the night. I just like that better. Then in the morning, I start over. I just put the pack liner back in the backpack. I pack the stuff the way I just demonstrated, and I get back on the road. So I hope that's helpful. If you have any questions about it or any better ideas about it, let me know. All right, bye.